It was an ordinary afternoon at a small, bustling diner, a place where people from all walks of life gathered to enjoy a warm meal. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of clinking cutlery, creating an inviting atmosphere. But today, something unusual was about to happen. The door swung open, and in walked a well-dressed man. His demeanor was calm, almost serene, as if nothing could shake his composure. Yet the moment he stepped inside, he felt it, the weight of eyes on him, particularly her eyes. Behind the counter stood a waitress, her expression sharp, her glare cold. She watched him like he didn't belong, as though his presence disrupted her carefully crafted world. And then, under her breath, just loud enough for a few patrons to hear, she muttered, "These types don't belong here." The room grew quieter, a few heads turned, and tension filled the air. What was it about this man that made her so hostile? What would happen next? Stay with me, because this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. But before we dive deeper, let me ask you, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments and let's see how far this story reaches. As the man approached the counter, his calm demeanor never faltered. He offered a polite smile and said, in a voice as gentle as the breeze, "Table for one, please." But his kindness was met with something unexpected. The waitress didn't smile back. Instead, her eyes narrowed, and her lips curled into a disdainful smirk. Without a word, she gestured vaguely toward a corner table, barely acknowledging him, as if he were invisible. Her movements were stiff, deliberate, almost as if she wanted to make him feel unwelcome. He thanked her anyway, walking to his seat with quiet grace. But the murmurs had already begun. Other diners were watching now, their whispers weaving through the air like an unseen current. They had noticed the way she treated him, the deliberate coldness in her every action. And then she said it. People like him. They don't belong here. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, sending ripples of shock through the room. A woman at the next table glanced at her husband, her eyes wide. A group of friends stopped mid-conversation, their faces frozen in disbelief. Even the busboy paused, his tray balanced precariously as he turned to look. But the man? He didn't flinch. He sat down, his composure unshaken, as if her words had no power over him. Little did she know, her actions had set something in motion. Something that would leave everyone in that diner speechless before the day was through. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Keep watching, because the way he responds will challenge everything you thought you knew about grace and resilience. Despite the cold reception, the man's spirit remained unshaken. He sat at his table, quietly observing the world around him, radiating a calmness that seemed almost unearthly. It was as if her hostility didn't exist, or perhaps he chose not to let it touch him. When his meal arrived, he didn't just dig in. He took a bite, savored the flavors, and then called over the cook, who had nervously peeked out from the kitchen. With a warm smile, he said, "This is absolutely delicious. Thank you for your hard work." The cook, caught off guard, beamed with pride as if those few kind words had made his day. At a nearby table, a restless child giggled, accidentally knocking over her juice. The man turned toward her with a gentle smile, playfully winking to calm her nerves. The little girl's laughter filled the room again, and her parents couldn't help but smile back at him in gratitude. But his kindness didn't stop there. As the busboy cleared his empty plate, the man quietly slipped a generous tip onto the tray. The young worker hesitated, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Thank you," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The man simply nodded as if to say, "You deserve it." And slowly the room began to notice. Patrons glanced from the man's small acts of kindness to the waitress, who continued to hover nearby, her hostility glaring like a spotlight. The contrast was undeniable, one exuding quiet grace, the other simmering resentment. But why? Why was he so kind, so composed, in the face of such blatant hostility? And what would happen next? The answer was something no one in that diner could have predicted. Stay with me, because this story is far from over. In fact, the most shocking moment is just around the corner. The air in the diner had grown thick, the weight of unspoken judgment hanging over every table. And then, just as it seemed the tension might dissipate, she snapped. The waitress marched toward the man's table, her expression cold and her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet hum of conversation. People like you, she spat, loud enough for everyone to hear. You think you can just walk in here with your politics, your views, like you belong? Well, you don't. The words hit like a thunderclap, and the diner fell silent. Forks clattered onto plates, whispers ceased, and every pair of eyes turned to the man. The atmosphere was electric, charged with disbelief and discomfort. A woman near the window covered her mouth in shock. A young couple exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions frozen in disbelief. But the man, he didn't react the way anyone expected. Slowly, deliberately, he stood up. His movements were calm, measured, commanding attention without a single raised voice. He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of each stunned patron. I walked in here like anyone else, he began, his voice steady but firm. I asked for a meal, nothing more. I didn't come here to make a scene. But if I'm being honest, maybe this moment isn't about me. The room was utterly still. Even the waitress, caught off guard by his poise, seemed to falter. And then, with a tone that carried both strength and compassion, he continued, words that would leave everyone in the diner questioning not just the situation, but themselves. What did he say? What truth did he reveal that silenced the room and changed everything? Keep watching, because the moment that follows will leave you speechless. The diner was silent, every eye fixed on the man as he stood tall. His voice, calm yet commanding, broke through the tension like a ray of light piercing a storm. You see, he began, I grew up knowing what it feels like to be judged before you're known. To have assumptions made about you before you've even said a word, but it taught me something. It taught me that kindness isn't just a virtue, it's a choice. And it's a choice I make every single day. He paused, scanning the room, his gaze softening as he spoke. We all carry our struggles, don't we? I've known hardship, hunger, rejection, but through it all I learned that dignity, respect, these are things we give to others, not because they've earned it, but because it's what makes us human. The crowd was transfixed, the weight of his words resonating with each person in the room. Even the waitress standing rigid behind the counter seemed to waver. Her expression shifted, no longer defiant but uneasy, as if the gravity of her actions was finally sinking in. This world is hard enough without us tearing each other down, he continued, his voice filled with quiet conviction. It costs nothing to show kindness, but its impact, that's priceless. Every small act of respect, every word spoken with care, it ripples outward, creating a world we can all be proud of. By now, tears glistened in the eyes of some patrons. Others nodded, their hearts stirred by the truth in his words. The little girl from earlier tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering, "He's nice, Mama." And for a moment, it felt like the walls of that small diner were holding something much bigger than themselves, a shared understanding. But it wasn't over yet. What would happen next? How would the waitress respond? And how would this man's powerful words leave a lasting mark on everyone there? Keep watching, because the most surprising moment is still to come. As the man finished his heartfelt speech, the room remained silent. It wasn't just the words he'd spoken, it was the sincerity behind them that hung in the air, touching everyone present. And then, from the back of the diner, a figure emerged. The owner. An older gentleman with a quiet authority. He had been observing everything from the shadows, his face a mixture of disappointment and resolve. Stepping forward, he cleared his throat, breaking the stillness. "Sir," he began, his voice steady, "on behalf of this diner, I want to apologize. This is not who we are, and it's not who we strive to be. He turned to the waitress, his expression firm. Your behavior was unacceptable, he said, his words carrying a finality that made the room hold its breath. I should ask you to leave. But before the owner could finish, the man raised a hand, his calm demeanor unwavering. No, he said gently, his voice cutting through the tension. Let her stay. The room collectively blinked, startled by his words. He continued, turning to the waitress, who now looked more vulnerable than hostile. Everyone deserves a chance to reflect and grow, he said. I've been given second chances in my life, and I'd like to offer you one now. The waitress's eyes filled with tears, her tough exterior cracking under the weight of her own regret. Her voice trembled as she said, I'm sorry, truly. I judged you without knowing you. I was wrong. The man nodded, his face kind. Apology accepted. But remember, it's not about proving people wrong, it's about showing them who you really are. Around the diner, patrons exchanged glances, some smiling, others wiping away tears. The owner placed a hand on the waitress's shoulder, his expression softening. Learn from this, he said simply. She nodded, her gratitude evident. It was a moment no one in that diner would forget, a lesson in humility, redemption, and the enduring power of kindness. But there was still one more thing left to reveal, and it would leave everyone speechless. As the man prepared to leave, the silence that had once gripped the diner transformed into something remarkable, a ripple of applause. It began at a corner table, then spread like wildfire until every patron was on their feet, clapping with heartfelt admiration. The sound echoed through the room, a celebration not just of his words, but of the quiet strength and compassion he had shown. He smiled humbly, nodding in gratitude as he walked toward the door. But before he stepped outside, he turned back, his gaze sweeping across the room one final time. Remember, he said, his voice calm yet powerful, we're all more alike than we are different. Choose kindness, always. With that, he exited, leaving behind a room filled with changed hearts and reflective minds. Patrons exchanged quiet words, their faces marked by a newfound understanding. Even the waitress, now seated in a corner, wiped away tears, the weight of her actions replaced by the hope of redemption. It's moments like these that remind us of the incredible power of kindness and forgiveness. A single act of grace can break down walls, mend hearts, and inspire change far beyond what we can see. As Mark Twain once said, kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. And in this small diner, on this unforgettable day, that language spoke louder than words ever could. So, the next time you find yourself in a moment of conflict, ask yourself, how can I be the one to choose kindness? Because sometimes the smallest act can create the biggest impact. And now the question is yours to answer. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have responded with the same grace and compassion? Or perhaps something different? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Take a moment to share your perspective in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation alive and learn from one another. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of kindness and forgiveness, then don't let it stop here. Hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and share this video with someone who might need a little reminder of the good we can bring into the world. Because together we can inspire change, one act of kindness at a time. Thank you for watching, and remember, the world needs more kindness. Will you be the one to share it?